Some men live their destinies, while others are dragged into them. Christopher Cross was one of those men from the second category. In 1945, Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street didn't just show us a man's downfall. It revealed the story of a soul lost in darkness. This film noir masterpiece, starring Edward G. Robinson, Joan Bennett, and Dan Duryea, tells the price of crime and passion so profoundly that by the end, you question who the real criminal truly is. Christopher Cross was a man in his 50s, quiet and modest, working as a cashier for the same company for 25 years. Every morning at the same time, he went to work. Every evening at the same time, he returned home. Waiting for him, there was his wife Adele, constantly nagging, never satisfied. A woman who had long forgotten what tenderness meant. Christopher's only escape was his oil paintings, created in his spare time. Nobody saw them, nobody appreciated them, but for him, they made the world meaningful. That night, he was returning from a company dinner, celebrating long-term employees. Walking through the rainy New York streets, sounds from around a corner caught his attention. A young, beautiful woman, Kitty March, appeared to be under attack by a man. Without thinking, Christopher intervened, striking the man with his umbrella. The attacker fled. Kitty seemed grateful, or at least that's how it appeared. That moment became the turning point in Christopher's life. The look in Kitty's eyes, the softness in her voice, made him feel something he hadn't felt in years, that he mattered. Kitty invited him to a cafe. As Christopher introduced himself, explaining who he was, he told a lie, a small, seemingly innocent lie. He implied he was a successful artist. Kitty's eyes sparkled with interest. But there was another man in Kitty's life, Johnny Prince, her real lover, her handsome but penniless and jobless boyfriend. Johnny told Kitty to use Christopher to extract money from him. The plan was simple. Kitty would pretend to be in love with Christopher, and he would give her his money and his paintings. Christopher rented an apartment for Kitty in Greenwich Village, hidden from his wife, hidden from his job. Every penny he gave Kitty was to maintain that sparkle in her eyes. He moved his paintings there too. He painted for Kitty, pouring his love for her onto the canvases. But Kitty and Johnny had other plans brewing in the shadows of that apartment. The paintings Christopher created in that Greenwich Village studio were different from anything he'd done before. They were alive with passion, burning with colors he'd never dared use. Each brushstroke was a declaration of love, each canvas a piece of his soul offered to Kitty. She would sit there, smoking her cigarettes, watching him work with those calculating eyes that Christopher mistook for admiration. Johnny would visit when Christopher wasn't there. He'd look at the paintings and see dollar signs. One day, he had an idea that would change everything. Why not sell the paintings? But not under Christopher's name, under Kitty's name. She would become the artist, the mysterious new talent in New York's art scene. Christopher would never know. And even if he found out, what could he do? He was stealing money from his employer to pay for the apartment. He was lying to his wife. He was as trapped as a fly in a spider's web. The deception began small. Johnny took one painting to an art dealer, presenting it as Kitty's work. The dealer was intrigued. Here was something raw, emotional. Unlike the polished works flooding the market, he wanted more. Soon, Kitty March was being talked about in art circles as the exciting new female artist who painted with such masculine vigor and feminine sensitivity combined. Christopher continued visiting the apartment, bringing more paintings, more money, more of himself. He'd tell Adele he was working late, attending business meetings. She suspected nothing, or perhaps she simply didn't care. Their marriage had been dead for years, a corpse they both pretended was still breathing. One evening, Christopher arrived at the apartment earlier than expected. Through the door, he heard voices, Kitty's laugh, but not the sweet laugh she reserved for him. This was different, genuine, full of real joy, and a man's voice. Johnny's voice. Christopher stood frozen in the hallway, his hand on the doorknob, his world crumbling with each word he heard through that thin wooden barrier. They were mocking him. Kitty was describing his pathetic attempts at romance, his trembling hands when he touched her shoulder, his stuttering declarations of love. Johnny was laughing, calling him an old fool, a walking wallet. But what hurt most was when Kitty mentioned the paintings. They were selling them, making good money, and the old fool had no idea. Christopher didn't confront them. He couldn't. He walked away, down those stairs, out into the New York night. But something had broken inside him. The meek, mild Christopher was fracturing, and something else was emerging from the cracks. He returned home to find Adele entertaining her first husband's friend, who revealed a shocking truth. Adele's first husband, whom she claimed was dead, was actually alive. This meant their marriage was invalid. Christopher was free. The irony was bitter. He was free from the one chain he'd grown comfortable with, but still enslaved by his passion for Kitty. The next day brought more revelations. At work, Christopher's boss discovered the embezzlement, the missing money, the forged signatures. But in a twist of fate, they blamed it on another employee who had recently committed suicide. Christopher said nothing. He let a dead man take the blame. Another piece of his soul crumbled away. That night, he went to the apartment. Kitty was alone. She tried her usual act, the sweet smiles, the gentle touches, but Christopher had seen behind the mask. He confronted her about the paintings, about Johnny, about everything. Kitty laughed. She didn't even try to deny it. She told him he was pathetic, that she could never love someone like him, that Johnny was twice the man he'd ever be. Something snapped in Christopher. Years of humiliation, decades of being invisible, all the rage he'd swallowed down like bitter medicine. It all erupted. He grabbed the ice pick from the table. Kitty's laughter stopped. Her eyes widened, not with the fake admiration she'd shown him so many times, but with real, genuine fear. For the first time, she truly saw him. The ice pick went in once, twice. Kitty fell. The apartment was silent, except for Christopher's heavy breathing. He stood there, looking down at her, at what he'd done. But instead of horror, he felt nothing, empty, like a painting that had been completed, with no more brushstrokes to add. Christopher left the apartment carefully, making sure no one saw him. He walked through the New York streets, just another anonymous figure in the night. At home, he washed his hands, changed his clothes, went to bed next to Adele, who snored softly, unaware that she was sleeping next to a murderer. The next morning brought headlines. Female artist found dead in Greenwich Village apartment. The police investigation moved quickly. They found Johnny's fingerprints everywhere. Witnesses had seen him coming and going. They'd heard arguments. When they arrested him, he protested his innocence, screamed that he hadn't been there that night. But who would believe him? He was a known criminal, a parasite who lived off women. Christopher attended the trial. He sat in the back, watching Johnny struggle, watching him being condemned for a crime he didn't commit. When Johnny looked around the courtroom, desperately seeking a friendly face, his eyes met Christopher's. For a moment, there was recognition. Johnny knew. But what could he say? That mild-mannered Christopher Cross was the real killer. Who would believe that? Johnny was convicted and sentenced to death. The newspapers called it justice. The art world mourned the loss of Kitty March, the promising artist whose life was cut short. Her paintings, those paintings Christopher had created with such passion, were now worth fortunes. Collectors fought over them. Museums wanted them. The irony was exquisite and terrible. Christopher thought he could return to his life, But the guilt, it was like paint that wouldn't wash off. He saw Kitty everywhere. In shop windows, in the faces of strangers, in the shadows of his room at night. She whispered to him, mocked him, reminded him of what he'd done. Johnny's voice joined hers after the execution. The two of them, a chorus of accusation that only Christopher could hear. He tried to confess. He went to the police, told them everything. They laughed. They thought he was insane, seeking attention. After all, the case was closed. Justice had been served. Christopher Cross, a murderer. The idea was absurd. They sent him away, told him to get help. Christopher lost his job when the embezzlement was finally traced to him. Without Adele, without work, without purpose, he became a ghost wandering the streets of New York. He lived in floff houses, took odd jobs when he could find them, drank cheap whiskey to silence the voices. But they always returned. Years passed. Christopher aged, became bent and gray, a shuffling figure that people avoided on the sidewalks. One Christmas Eve, he passed an art gallery. In the window was one of his paintings, one of Kitty's paintings, being sold for thousands of dollars. A couple stood admiring it, discussing its emotional depth, the tragedy of the artist's death, adding to its value. Christopher stood in the snow, watching them, watching his work celebrated under another's name. He thought about going in, telling them the truth. But what was the truth anymore? Had he really painted those pictures? Or had Kitty, in some way, created them by inspiring such passion, such madness in him? Was the artist the one who held the brush, or the one who drove the hand? He walked away, disappearing into the snowy night, just another forgotten soul in the city. Behind him, the painting glowed in the gallery window, a testament to passion, crime, and the price of both. The streets were scarlet with Christmas lights, but for Christopher, they would always be colored with blood. The film ends with Christopher walking into the darkness, the voices of Kitty and Johnny still haunting him. He's neither dead nor alive, neither guilty in the eyes of the law, nor innocent in his own heart. He exists in a purgatory of his own making, a living ghost story wandering the streets of New York. This is what Fritz Lang gave us in Scarlet Street. Not just a crime story, but a meditation on guilt, desire, and the masks we wear. Every character wears a mask. Kitty pretends to love Christopher. Christopher pretends to be an artist, a wealthy man, a person of importance. Johnny pretends to be tough when he's really a coward. Even Adele pretends her first husband is dead. In this world of deception, the only truth is the darkness that eventually consumes them all. The brilliance of Edward G. Robinson's performance lies in his transformation. He doesn't suddenly become evil. Instead, we watch him slowly dissolve. Each compromise, each lie, each moment of weakness, adding up until there's nothing left of the original Christopher Cross. By the time he picks up that ice pick, he's already destroyed himself. Killing Kitty is just the external manifestation of an internal murder that's already taken place. Joan Bennett's Kitty is equally complex. She's not a simple femme fatale. There are moments when you wonder if she feels something genuine for Christopher, if perhaps she hates herself for what she's doing. Her cruelty comes from a place of desperation, a woman trapped in her own web of poverty and dependence on Johnny. She uses Christopher because she herself is being used. It's a chain of exploitation that ends in blood. Dan Duryea's Johnny is the perfect catalyst for tragedy. He's weak, parasitic, but also strangely pathetic. When he's executed for a crime he didn't commit, you feel a twisted sympathy. He's guilty of many things, but not the one thing he dies for. It's a cosmic joke that Fritz Lang plays with bitter precision. The Greenwich Village apartment becomes a character itself in the film. It starts as Christopher's paradise, a place where he can be the man he dreams of being, but it transforms into a trap, a stage for deception, and finally a crime scene. Those walls absorb all the lies, all the passion, all the violence, until the very air seems poisoned. The paintings serve as a metaphor for identity and authenticity. Who is the real artist? The one who creates, or the one who inspires? The one who holds the brush, or the one whose name is on the canvas? Christopher's art only becomes valuable when it's attributed to someone else. His truth only matters when it becomes a lie. It's a bitter commentary on how society values appearance over reality. Fritz Lang's direction is masterful in its use of shadows and light. The film noir style isn't just aesthetic, it's psychological. The shadows that fall across Christopher's face mirror the darkness growing inside him. The light that illuminates Kitty often feels harsh, exposing her beauty as something cold and calculating. The entire film feels like it's taking place in a moral twilight, where nothing is clearly good or evil. The theme of emasculation runs throughout the film. Christopher is belittled by his wife, manipulated by his mistress, and ignored by society. His violence is the explosion of decades of impotence. But even in murder, he remains impotent. He can't claim his crime any more than he could claim his art. He remains invisible, even in his most visible act. The sound design deserves special mention. The voices that haunt Christopher at the end aren't just supernatural elements. They're the externalization of his conscience, but also of his inability to escape the very people he tried to possess and destroy. Kitty and Johnny are more present in death than they ever were in life, because now they exist entirely in Christopher's mind, where he can never escape them. What makes Scarlet Street so disturbing is its suggestion that Christopher is not unique. He's an everyman, a typical nobody who could be anyone. The film asks us to consider how many Christopher crosses walk among us. How many people are one humiliation, one rejection, one bad day away from violence. It's a film that makes us uncomfortable because it shows us the potential for evil in the most mundane of lives. The title itself, Scarlet Street, carries multiple meanings. It's the street where Kitty lives and dies, painted scarlet with her blood. It's the path Christopher walks, marked by his shame and guilt. It's the road we all travel when we let passion override conscience, when we choose desire over morality. The street is scarlet because it's paved with the consequences of our worst impulses. In today's world, Scarlet Street remains relevant because it deals with timeless themes: the manipulation, the false identities, the way people use and dispose of each other. These haven't changed. If anything, in our age of social media and curated personas, the film's exploration of authentic versus performed identity feels more pertinent than ever. The film also speaks to the modern crisis of masculinity. Christopher's violent response to emasculation, his need to possess and control when he feels powerless. These are issues we still grapple with. The film doesn't excuse his actions, but it does force us to understand them, to see how a seemingly harmless man becomes a killer. My personal reflection on this film is that it's one of the most honest depictions of human weakness ever put on screen. It doesn't give us heroes or villains, just flawed people making terrible choices. It shows us that evil isn't always dramatic or obvious. Sometimes it's quiet, desperate, and pathetic. Sometimes it wears the face of a mild-mannered cashier who just wanted to be loved. What strikes me most is the film's refusal to provide catharsis. Christopher doesn't get caught, but he doesn't get away with it either. He's trapped in a hell of his own making, a punishment perhaps worse than any prison. It makes you wonder, is it better to be punished by society or by your own conscience? Is external justice necessary when internal justice is so brutal? Every time I watch Scarlet Street, I find myself thinking about the roads not taken. What if Christopher had been honest from the beginning? What if Kitty had shown him genuine kindness? What if Johnny hadn't been so greedy? The film is full of these what-ifs, These moments where everything could have gone differently. But that's life, isn't it? A series of choices that lead us down our own scarlet streets. For me, this film serves as a cautionary tale about the danger of living an inauthentic life. Christopher's tragedy begins not with murder, but with the first lie he tells about himself. Each deception builds on the last, until he's lost in a labyrinth of his own making. The film asks us, who are you really, and what are you willing to do to maintain the illusion of who you pretend to be? The ending haunts me every time. Christopher, walking those New York streets, hearing those voices, unable to claim even his crimes as his own. He's achieved the ultimate invisibility. He's become nothing, no one, a ghost, haunting his own life. It's a fate that makes death seem merciful by comparison. This is why Scarlet Street endures. It's not just a crime film or a noir thriller. It's a moral investigation into the human soul. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about desire, violence, and the masks we all wear. It shows us that the Scarlet Street isn't just a place in Greenwich Village. It's a path we're all capable of walking, given the right circumstances and the wrong choices. What do you think drives a person to violence? Is it passion, humiliation, or something deeper? Have you ever felt that moment where you could choose between right and wrong, knowing that the wrong choice might feel so right? These are the questions Scarlet Street leaves us with. Questions that don't have easy answers. The film's analysis reveals multiple layers of meaning that were revolutionary for 1945. Fritz Lang brought German expressionism to American noir, creating a hybrid that influenced countless films after it. The psychological complexity, the moral ambiguity, the refusal to provide simple answers or comfortable endings, these were all groundbreaking for American cinema of the time. The production itself was troubled. The film was initially banned in several cities for its content. The idea that a murderer could go unpunished was considered immoral, but that's exactly what makes the film so powerful. It doesn't tell us what we want to hear. It shows us what we need to see, that justice isn't always served, that evil sometimes wins, and that the greatest punishment might be having to live with ourselves. The cinematography by Milton Krasner deserves special recognition. Every frame is composed like one of Christopher's paintings, beautiful but somehow wrong, attractive but disturbing. The way shadows fall across faces, the way light reveals and conceals, it's all deliberate and meaningful. The visual language of the film speaks as loudly as its dialogue. Looking at the performances, Edward G. Robinson gives perhaps his finest work here. Known primarily for gangster roles, he shows incredible range as Christopher. He makes us sympathize with a murderer, understand a weak man's descent into evil. It's a performance that's both subtle and devastating, building slowly to an explosion that feels both shocking and inevitable. Joan Bennett transforms herself completely from her usual roles. Her Kitty is seductive but cold, vulnerable but calculating. She makes us understand why Christopher falls for her, while also making us see the emptiness behind her beauty. It's a performance that defined the femme fatale archetype, while also subverting it. The film's influence on later cinema cannot be overstated. You can see its DNA in everything from Taxi Driver to Gone Girl. The unreliable narrator, the ordinary person driven to extraordinary violence, the exploration of toxic masculinity. These themes that Scarlet Street pioneered continue to resonate in contemporary filmmaking. From a technical standpoint, the film's use of sound is revolutionary. The way reality and hallucination blend in the final act, with Christopher hearing voices that may or may not be real, predicts techniques that wouldn't become common until decades later. The sound becomes expressionistic, representing internal states rather than external reality. The script by Dudley Nichols adapts Georges de la Fouchardiere's novel with remarkable intelligence. It maintains the source material's cynicism while adding layers of psychological complexity. The dialogue feels natural while carrying tremendous thematic weight. Every line serves multiple purposes, revealing character, advancing plot, and exploring the film's themes. In the context of 1945, when America was emerging from World War II, Scarlet Street offered a dark counter-narrative to the optimism of victory. It suggested that the real war was internal, that the enemy wasn't across the ocean, but within ourselves. This was a brave and controversial stance that challenged audiences' expectations and comfort zones. The film's treatment of art and commerce is particularly fascinating. The paintings that Christopher creates in obscurity become valuable only when attributed to someone else. It's a bitter commentary on how the art world values story over substance, personality over talent. The fact that Christopher can never claim his work, even after Kitty's death, speaks to how society constructs and maintains artificial narratives. Today, Scarlet Street remains essential viewing because it refuses to age. Its themes of alienation, violence, and the performance of identity feel contemporary. In an era of false social media personas and carefully curated lives, Christopher's desperate attempt to be someone he's not resonates deeply. We all know what it's like to pretend, to wear masks, to wish we were someone else. The film asks fundamental questions about justice and morality. Is Johnny's execution just because he was a bad person, even if he didn't commit this particular crime? Is Christopher's psychological torture sufficient punishment for his crime? These aren't questions with easy answers, and the film respects its audience enough not to provide them. For modern audiences, Scarlet Street offers a masterclass in filmmaking. Every element, from performance to cinematography to sound design, works in harmony to create a unified vision. It's a film that rewards multiple viewings, revealing new layers and meanings each time. Details that seem insignificant on first viewing become crucial upon reflection. What would you have done in Christopher's place? Would you have walked away when you discovered the deception? Could you have resisted the temptation to become someone more important, more loved, more visible? These are the questions that make Scarlet Street not just a great film, but a profound exploration of human nature. Classic films like this one aren't just entertainment or historical artifacts. They're mirrors that reflect our own struggles and fears. Scarlet Street shows us that the distance between ordinary and evil is shorter than we'd like to believe. It reminds us that we're all walking our own scarlet streets, hoping we won't lose our way in the darkness.